Hi guys. Today we're just going to have kind of a freewheeling talk, and it's going to be about the DSLR, and we're also going to get into exposure. So happy phonography. I have gotten some good results. I've gotten some good comments about working with your phone. But really and truly, we know that what you've signed up for is to take some pictures with the DSLR. So I'm just going to be starting to free associate about the camera. Here's a couple things. When you are working with your camera, make sure, and I will speak from experience, make sure that you have a card in your camera. Usually I have a battery in the camera. That's another thing to make sure of. But I have, on more than one occasion, I have found myself short of a card, and I've had to stop and buy a card someplace. So take extra cards along. I like to travel real light. Now, something about cards. Do not have the camera turned on. So your camera, I don't know where your switch is, but you have a manual. This is an old Canon T3, a very good camera, good standard camera, and the switch is over here on the side. Make sure that it is in the off position when you are going to be opening up the bottom, the battery compartment. Make sure that you're going to have it turned off when you decide that you're going to take out the battery or take out the card, okay? Never have the camera turned on because it will start writing gibberish on it and it'll destroy lots of pictures that you probably want to have. A lot of times the camera will have a little red light on the back of it. And if that's blinking, it means that the camera is writing code to the memory. So don't you dare take the card out if that little red light on the back of your camera is blinking. I'll be assigning some text pages for this. But I did notice in the text that they had done something right for you. And that is, they said, if you're going to clean the lens, which you should be concerned about, use lens tissue. Do not use eyeglass cleaner tissue, or use a real nice, soft microfiber type of thing. And don't apply the liquid to the lens. If you have lens cleaning liquid, apply that to the little lens tissue. But before you do that, I want you to play the game of turning the camera upside down and then blowing on it, and gravity will take all of the chunks of dust and grit that Arizona is so full of, and gravity will drop that down to the floor. At this time, you can take your dampened lens tissue or your dampened towel and you can clean. By the way, what you are cleaning should actually not be the lens. On top of this lens is a screw-on filter, and it says on it UV filter. I know that you probably can't read that, but it will say on it ultraviolet or UV or skylight filter. That's your insurance policy. On occasion, nobody likes to talk about it, the lens will impact something. If you break the filter, you're out $15. If you break the lens, you're out $150 or $250. So please, 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 if you've spent any money on a camera or you value your camera, make sure that you put this clear filter on it. UV filter will not affect any pictures that you're taking. at low altitudes, and it will help you if you travel up to 10,000 feet. If you're going to go up to Flagstaff, the UV filter will help you to get better color rendition. So the main purpose is to actually protect the front of the lens. Okay, so after you have cleaned the lens and you're happy with the lens, then we're going to talk about some settings on this camera. There are three things that affect the quality of your exposure. There are two dirty words. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody here, but there are two dirty words in photography. Those words both end in exposure. So we're going to play a guessing game. Blank exposure and blank exposure. What do you think? What do you think? Okay. If you get too much light in your camera, you have overexposure. Your pictures will be very light and they will be very hard to see, and you can't get a good print out of an overexposed picture. Likewise, underexposure. So if you want to start cussing in photographies, you could say, oh, underexposure, oh, overexposure. Those are dirty words to a photographer. Neither of those opposites will present anything usable for you in your photography. So what you're aiming for is the perfect exposure. And right now, at the beginning, you're going to rely on the camera's built-in light meter in order to get the perfect exposure. There are three settings that you have to worry about with your camera when it comes to getting the correct exposure. One of those is called the lens opening, or it's called the aperture. And hidden inside the lens barrel here are metal sleeves that go bigger and smaller, and they will make the opening larger, smaller, and these are measured in F numbers. Shutter speed is usually on a camera like this, your shutter speed is reading here, and you're able to also see what your shutter speed is on the inside as you're taking a picture. Every camera has some form of a control wheel, a great big dial, either on the top or on the front or on the back, and that's where you're going to be adjusting your shutter speed, or your shutter speed and your lens opening. Okay, so we have the lens opening. We can either have a big lens opening or a little tiny lens opening, and then we need to balance that with our shutter speed. So I'm going to take just a second here, and I'm going to show you a couple of things about a camera on a diagram. Think of a camera as a dark room. A camera is room in Italian, and camera obscura is a dark room. And pinhole photography, we didn't get to start with that because we don't have our chemical lab, but pinhole photography is a type of very, very, very simple photography. Sometimes you use a shoebox, sometimes you use an old paint can, and you just punch a hole in one side and put photo paper in, and guess what? You can take pictures with that. So even if you have a $1,500 camera body, one thing that's really essential is a dark room with no light leaks. Now, I've been on ocean liners once or twice, So I want you to think about a stateroom. And it's like a little tiny cubicle. And what you're going to find is that if you're lucky, you're going to have a porthole so that you can see out. So I'm going to draw a porthole about this big. This represents what's called a shutter. And your camera has shutter, and your camera has shutter speeds. So let's say, just offhand, let's say that this diameter here is a fairly large diameter, and I'm just going to call that F2 or F2.8 or F3.5. Those are all fairly large. If you were to go inside of your room and you took a shade and you put it up over the window and it was completely dark, okay? And then you said, I'm going to open the window for 1/2 of a second. And you go like this, and you go like this, and you close the window back up, all right? Now we have a 1/2 second exposure, and we have used a fairly large lens opening. Now maybe you don't like that stateroom, so you go down the hall, and there's another room. It's just a big, only one source of light, and this time there's just a very small porthole, much smaller, okay? Well, that would represent an F number like F16, okay? F16 is a fairly small F number, and F2 is a fairly large F number. So what I'd like you to do here is think about going into this room and putting this up, and then when you want to, you say, I'm going to take a picture, I'm going to allow light to come into the camera and hit the sensor, and then you drop the shutter and you've opened it, but that light is going to come in at a much slower rate because the opening is smaller. And then you're going to close it, and then you will have made an exposure. So I'm going to end for this section right now. Just remember that the shutter speed and the lens opening, they need to work together. Otherwise, you're going to come up with those bad words, overexposure and underexposure.